Alrighty. Good morning, everybody. This is the Podman Community Cabal meeting. Today is Thursday, November 17th. We don't have a whole lot of topics today. We only have one topic from Dan about Docker Compose support for the command line. So if you have any questions or comments or topics that you want to talk about today would be a great time to do so. And if you have not done so already, please sign in the HackMD. I will put a link into the chat here. So we know who came on in. And for this meeting today is generally a meeting talking about design topics or things that you'd like to see change in Podman over time, more so than demoing things. But given that we have a lot of time today, we could take a look at things other than the normal design if people want to. So with all that, I'm going to hand it over to Dan to start up the topic of Docker Compose support for the command line. And we will try it with Dan unmuted.
So this requirement's really coming in from Podman Desktop, and we don't have stuff on here. But Florent, could you comment on all you're hearing about this?
Yeah, so a lot of people are using Docker Compose when they are using Docker Desktop on macOS or Windows, and they want to be able to deploy their Docker Compose files or deployments. And so we have different ways to do that, either by using Podman Compose or by using the Compose binary and using the socket from Podman, setting the Docker host and set that to the Podman socket. But the users need to do extra steps. It's not like, okay, I have installed Podman and I'm able to start my Compose application in a few seconds.
All right, Stefan, since you just joined, we're talking about the requirements mainly coming from Podman Desktop about Compose support. Florent gave a quick go. Do you want to make any comments on that as well?
I don't know if Laurent already mentioned that, but I think with the recent announcement that we had, we saw a lot of feedback related to this. So a lot of developers are basically asking how to use their Compose file along with Podman Desktop. We have been even compared with Rancher Desktop about the support of Docker Compose. So I think it's an important area.
You know, does Rancher support it? Does Nerd Control support it right now?
It depends the container engine you choose with it. So yeah, there was a comparison somewhere. I could maybe find the link. But yeah, there are different options to do it. We even introduce a documentation about how to do that. But I think Florent was mentioning that it's more about how do we enable that and make it part of the default setup. In fact,
could you paste the link for the documentation that was made?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Brent, can you turn up your gain a little bit? You're very quiet.
How about I just sit closer? Is that better?
That works too. So I think the question, if we were to support it, we have two choices. Obviously, there's the Podman Compose project, and then the second option is to actually take and vendor in Docker Compose from Docker. I think we'd have to move to the latest Golang version of Docker Compose in order to make this happen. what do people think about that?
So it feels to me that it will be a better path because it will allow us to stay up to date with the state of the compose specification as well.
Yeah.
So it's easier.
Yeah, my opinion on Podman Compose versus Docker Compose, specifically for this use case, is that you're already having to use client-server operations in order to get it to work. So using Docker Compose is probably a better solution. Plus, I think we're forced to support Docker Compose in the real world, at least on the server side. Pulling in Podman Compose would be that much more work. But we do have a conflict of names so that if we did this, and I can see Brent getting all upset about who's going to support this. So that's another huge issue.
No, I firmly believe we should talk about the idea, and then we can talk about that.
Yeah.
And we've already hashed this one at
1,000 times. Yeah.
Well, we hashed this one the last time at our face-to-face. I was gonna be a little more quiet just to offer other people opportunity to input and then say my piece.
Yeah. We have some, before Brent says his piece, we have some other community members here today.
Yeah,
Non-redheaders. We'd love to hear your opinions.
exactly.
Anybody not too scared to turn their camera on or at least their microphone? Martin, your screen's on, but we're not hearing a sound.
Yeah, well, I wanted to give everybody else a chance since I am a red hatter, but not really a core Podman person. You know, I've always seen value in Docker Compose and, you know, the utility of the Docker Compose format. A lot of the things that we publish internally and that I've been involved with even at Red Hat kind of depend on Docker Compose, and having full support for Docker Compose directly within Podman, I think would be useful. You know, this is something that we have talked about internally, and you know, a lot of the focus of what we, you know, sort of wanted to do with Docker Compose is in some ways addressed by the Podman play kube functionality between generate kube, you know, the ability to do systemd support for those kinds of things. Yeah, Brent?
Martin, I was just curious when you said this is something that we've discussed. Could you tell me who we is?
Well, it was there were a bunch of discussions that were kind of not especially public around the beginning of this year with Scott McCarty and Valentine.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to understand kind of where that was kind of coming from. Okay. You mentioned that the kube thing is, let's just say it does 75% of what Docker Compose does, maybe more. For some things, it could be a good replacement, but it does still seem like Docker Compose is the orchestrator, if you will, for single node deployment. They've unfortunately in that regard kind of got the standard, although it's not a standard.
De facto.
Yeah, it's a de facto standard, and you know it's a convenient format. You know, you can look at a compose file and very easily understand what it's doing and how it works. You know, kube YAML, if you're used to dealing with kube YAML, is pretty clear too. But kube has got some sort of multi-node baggage and all the PVC and other kinds of things that you sometimes need to do. Like you can find compose files for a lot of different projects, and it would be super convenient to just be able to take your thing that you can expect to be able to bring up using Docker Compose and just expect that will work under Podman too. I think there's value to that.
Understood. I want to just lay out a little history so we're all kind of talking on the same set of points. I thought up until Docker went from Python to Golang with their Compose, we had a great story because we were able to hook their client to our back end, and off we went. And we could use their client being the Python bindings to test against or use for other purposes. And then Docker Compose itself was really just a application that used those Python bindings. That approach doesn't exist now. Now it's been incorporated into Docker, and they added a couple commands that we don't have.
Can you elaborate on that, Brent? I'm not aware of. Is this in the API or?
No, I think there's one or two new Compose things that are not in the Python library, and also vice versa.
But
that said,
Brent, you can run the current Go version as standalone client. You don't need the Docker client for it.
Say again?
You can run the new Docker V2, Docker Compose V2 as standalone client, just like the old Python version.
And maybe that's going to end up to be the answer. But what I was trying to impress was, I thought we had I think we really did have the right approach prior, which was we just support the back end and you bring your front end. And this is now more difficult because we still would need a back end. We would need to add functions to the back end, but now we're also contemplating how to deliver the front end. And that's probably, for me, where the ground gets soft.
Yep.
I think we could be easily convinced to support new Docker function. I mean, that's just a matter of getting in the queue and getting in line.
Yeah, I'd be real enticed if Paul's correct, and I believe Paul is correct, if we could exec out to it, as opposed to sucking it in for, if nothing else, just for keeping Podman from putting on another 20 megabytes of size, and then making it optional that you can install it optionally.
And this is something we talked about in face-to-face and afterwards. I guess my reservation with that, having not thought about it anymore since we last talked about it, was I really, really don't want to see that first tweet that says, "Oh, Podman's claiming Docker Compose support," and all he did was ship the client. I mean, that's pretty brutal.
Well, they would realize it was compatible then. So.
Yes. I guess to bring up a sore point, this is where the plugin idea for me came from.
Yeah.
With the idea that we wouldn't actually bloat Podman and we could put in and remove function as needed.
And that exact topic has come up with a company that's trying to put Podman in edge devices, and they're attempting to remove Podman service and Podman machine, and seeing if that does reduce size. So those could potentially be candidates for, if it reduces size. I don't know if it does, but they, for most users, they probably are optional. For a lot of users, anyways.
Indeed. I think there are even more, but yes.
Yeah, but those two ones are clearly something different than standard Podman commands.
There though, you would still have to tidy up, I think, the back end. You would, if you did it that way, the plugin would just be a CLI, and I don't know that really helps the desktop team's primary problem, which is
right. No, yeah.
How do I get it? And then really they're in the same position that we are, because theoretically they could write a compose client in desktop in JavaScript and send things off. But they have the same problem that we do. That's a lot of work. And then a pretty big drag on the team thereafter.
Yeah.
I mean, why are we really discussing integration here? We need to support. Support and integration are two separate things. We can support without integrating. It's trivial right now, I would say, to ship compose v2 in the VM image and allow the desktop team to call out to it, possibly via an SSH interface, stuff like that, without directly integrating it into anything else we do. All we really have to commit to is improving testing of it via the API.
Well, they don't want it on the VM. They want it on the Mac.
That's honestly even simpler. All it really needs is access to the Docker socket. Or in this case, the Podman socket. That is definitely the Docker socket.
But we're still talking about delivery of a client that neither team really wants to do. And it's delivery of somebody else's client.
Well, frankly, the alternative is that we rewrite it ourselves, and I don't think anyone here wants to do that. So
that's true, but
At most, we would remove the Dockers from there and make it say Podman. But so there's two steps there, right? One, as soon as we do this, we take on the support headache of it. And then eventually, if Red Hat wants to make a product out of this thing, or a product's probably the wrong word, but a supported version of Podman from Red Hat, then we have to really support, compose. Right now, we can sort of throw our bugs right at Docker when bugs throw up.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't see an elegant way to do this without being brute force.
Yep. I agree with you.
Just decide as a team that this is what we're going to do and make it happen.
I think, Stefan, you had a couple of fairly large customers not customers, probably the wrong term, but large companies that have been looking at moving to Podman Desktop, and they've basically said the lack of compose is the only thing that will block them from doing it, right?
Capture that. I hope you're capturing those, because that's going to be the number one way for us to convince anyone. Because what we're ignoring right now is the reality, and the reality is brute force means get help / cut function commitments. Yeah. So that if you can capture those things, that's probably the most compelling.
Absolutely, yeah.
The get help part.
Absolutely, Brent. And in fact, I even start to a document which is listing all the different mentions about the support of Compose. So,
Great.
and when I say the different mentions here, I am in the context of comments on social networks or reactions into the Hacker News thread or things that we have been seeing recently happening. So the discussion with large companies that we have as well are on a track differently.
Yes.
Dan, sounds like we need one or more chief whiners in charge.
I think we need to, I mean, we don't have any product managers here. But I'm sure if we talk to Mark and Scott, they would probably agree. Go, Florent.
Yeah, and it means that the sockets that this compose binary will look up will be by default the Podman socket as well.
I don't see any reason why we shouldn't just ship the symlink. Why do we want to bother with this Docker_host nonsense? Just ship a symlink on OS X Windows that links docker.sock to podman.sock. That's what we do on Linux.
Yeah, the problem there is that if you have both installed simultaneously, then we clash.
Yep.
But if we're going to brute force it, we could also just change this default.
I guess, yeah, at the risk of sort of talking too much about what I'm thinking as I'm thinking it, I guess for me, if we can get PM to acknowledge and say that they want this and it's important, and we can complement that with what we hear from the desktop team and their feedback, that if we fall into the get help bucket, then that likely dictates the design of how this would all get implemented. Because I think there's a good, better, best approach here. And technically, I'm not worried at all. As Matt says, this and Paul, this stuff can be glued together pretty quickly. So I don't think this is a technical challenge.
Yeah. The sad thing here is we're about to publish a couple of articles that I just saw demos of it this morning that show how well the whole Kubernetes story works. And this a little bit muddies the water.
Yeah.
But I don't see how this is almost like the whole Dockerfile thing. It's like, okay, we have to support everything that Dockerfile does because there's 10 billion Docker files out there. And if there's 10 billion compose files, people are going to expect to be able to use them.
I don't think it necessarily muddies the water too much. You know, while it's certainly possible that someone might deploy a compose file in production, you know, I don't think that's the primary way that they're being used. And you know, it's one of those things. It's just it's expected in the ecosystem, and the fact that it's not currently a great story is kind of an issue.
You know, we have I mean, to give you an idea of what we're going to be doing with Compose very soon is, are you familiar with Quadlet?
Heard just a little bit about it.
So Quadlet is basically a simplified systemd unit file where you can specify things like, you can just say, you know, run MariaDB, and you just say in the unit file container equals MariaDB, and put that unit file in the system, and Podman and systemd is smart enough to know if you have a container block that says run MariaDB, it's just going to fire it up in the best practices. So what we're working on right now is in a Quadlet to basically say Kubernetes YAML file equals path to Kubernetes YAML file. And underneath the covers inside of, again, that's be the only line you have to have, or 2 or 3 lines in a Quadlet unit file you can put on your system, and Podman will go out and actually execute fully underneath systemd control and monitoring and processes all of the stuff that's defined inside the Kubernetes YAML file. And the Kubernetes YAML file is such that you could have multiple different pods, multiple different containers, and have that all sitting under a unit file. So it's a real nice story in that you could then take those Kubernetes YAML files and run them in Kubernetes for, say, your entire CI/CD system. But when you come to running on, say, an edge device, you could run the Kubernetes YAML file. So you can do all your testing in OpenShift and Kubernetes. You can run your actual services without Kubernetes on a local node. And it's something as simple as basically saying, here's the path to the Kubernetes YAML file, Podman, do the right thing. And that's all from the user's point of view. So it's now I don't see us ever doing anything like that with Compose, because Compose, it doesn't really make sense, because Compose, we sort of don't really know what's going on, and then you kind of integrate it tightly into System D and things like that. That's why it's like we're just about there with the Kubernetes YAML file, but I don't. It's getting to the point that we're I'm trying to use a non-disgusting form, but we're fighting into the wind, I guess, is the there's a heavy headwind that says now we got to get slowly but surely. This seems to be the last piece of Docker controlled world that we don't have yet. That's hopefully the last blocker.
Well, Dan, I'd like to add to that, because this very much reminds me of the waffling we did with the RESTful API.
Right.
There, however, we had Varlink also motivating us to get out of that. But we knew what the right answer was.
Yeah.
That we were just going to have to bite down and make it hurt. And none of us really wanted to go to the woodshed for that one. But we knew what the answer, we know what's right. And I think here we know what's right. It's just that as it stands today, the team can't do it. They can't take it. And yeah, we just need something. I mean, on the flip side, that was, in the first third of Podman's life history, that was one of the more successful things we did deploy in terms of people loved it.
Yeah.
And I think you would get a similar reaction. You'd get a similar opportunity to show parity and boast, if you will. We could theoretically do some interesting stuff for converting automatically Compose files to kube YAML.
Yeah, but that would be our secret sauce on top, if you could basically say,
Right.
Podman generate kube from Kubernetes from a Compose file.
Exactly. So again, I think we all know the right answer. It's just everyone's going to have to stand up and take it.
Anybody else? Any other comments? This is a quiet bunch. All right. Does anybody want to talk about anything else in the?
Yes, actually, we have another topic that came in while we were discussing all this. So I'm going to hand it over to Florent for Docker socket helper on macOS enabled by default.
Yeah, so we have a lot of people that are installing Podman on their computer. And for example, they are using tools and these tools are connecting to the Docker socket, like test containers when you are doing Java stuff and stuff like that. And then if you install by default Podman on macOS, you don't have the helper that bind this socket. So by default, it's not working. And it's quite hard to read. It's when you start a Podman machine, you have the instruction saying, okay, you need to install the Podman Mac helper by doing this command line execution. And on Windows, it is enabled by default. the binding. So I was wondering if, as on Windows, we could have the socket mounted by default as well for macOS.
I think
Not doing an extra
I have
step.
no problem with that, but what do you think the community is going to say if they already have Docker listing on that socket?
So, for example, on Windows, it checks if there is a file here, and if there is no file, it mounts the socket at this location.
I'd be fine with it. Go ahead, Paul.
I think the problem is that it needs root access, right? You need to execute it with sudo, the command. And if you type Podman machine start, that's not as root. So we couldn't create a socket there, even if we wanted.
Okay, but for example, we have now macOS installer, and it needs to be root, I think, to install, because it installed the Podman binaries in /opt/podman. So you are giving root to the installer.
I don't think opt needs root to be accessed.
It needs, I mean, I cannot remove the folder without doing a sudo. So I guess it's using root.
Yeah. So Ashley, could you look into what it would see if we could do this? Work with you.
My first instinct is opt / what is it? I don't think it needs root because usually that's where the homebrew install is, and every time you use homebrew, you don't need root to like write files into opt. So that's my first instinct, but I could be wrong.
You can look it up. It needs root. The Podman
Okay,
make helper it creates a raw run docker sock. That's where it needs root for.
Yeah, that needs root, but I'm saying opt doesn't.
What does Docker do?
Docker runs as root, I guess.
Yeah, when you install Docker Desktop, at some point you need to enter your password, the root. Yeah.
You have to enter your root password, or is it?
Yeah, you need
So
to enter.
really, this becomes a installation change. So,
yeah.
So we could talk to. I think is Gerard done most of the installation at this point?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk to see. Basically, it can come up and attempt to install. If it requires root, they can always, we can make it optional that you don't have to do this if you don't want to enter the root password. And people without the root password wouldn't need to do it. But then you have to set the environmental variable. That sound reasonable?
Yeah, it looks nice. I think it will be nice for user as a first experience. Yeah.
I agree. Can you open up an issue on
yes, sure.
Podman, and then we'll talk to them. Oh, we can do this at the next, also at the next Podman desktop meeting next Tuesday, whenever that is.
And it is the case, yeah, in Windows. So, yeah.
But I don't think anybody on this team cares about
Windows and Mac. Okay.
Would object to us listening on the Docker socket by default. On Linux, that'd be a little harder sell, but traditionally. But I think it's less common that people have both installed.
Well, on Linux, we already shipped the extra package there, the Podman Docker.
Podman desktop. Yeah, Podman Docker. Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw, but now Docker is using a socket in the home folder as well, not in var run docker sock as well. So we may not need root as well to the new default path.
Oh, really? Okay.
And they change that at some point.
Doesn't that mean every app in the world has to change?
So they try to remove that in the latest Docker desktop binary, but then they had to revert that change because all the applications were failing due to that. Yeah.
I mean, that's we're getting yelled at because we don't listen there. So, but yeah, I think you okay with that, Brent?
Yeah. Users first.
Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to discuss?
No.
So maybe we have a little bit more time. Mainly about issue triage on Podman, because recently I see, or at least I'm one of the persons who triages issues, and there is an increase in outdated issues, like versions that are extremely old for upstream standards, like 3.x is nothing we care about upstream at this point. There are an increased number of issues that do not provide enough details, that have no, like we have the issue template with Podman info, or at the minimum that's not, and I see an increased amount of Red Hat issues filed against the GitHub, which also isn't something I think we really want upstream. So I'm wondering how we can improve the situation with either automation or generally how we want to improve issue triaging in general, because I'm typing the same commands on these type of issues, and Dan does as well, and Matt and whoever looks at this stuff. So
I have some ideas there. It might be good to talk with Ed, because he's been doing quite a bit of dealing with GitHub labels. But my feeling would be, I probably would prefer that issues that lag or stagnant die, because they do have considerable amount of noise. And I agree, at least in principle, that anything for Podman 1 and 2 should be wiped out. And Paul's probably right. Upstream 3 is irrelevant to us. I know that downstream 3 is still very relevant, but there are other facilities for filing defects against version 3.
I think most of those come in from Ubuntu, right? Ubuntu and friends.
Yep. But one idea could be, for example, an unable to reproduce flag, and come up with an agreement that those will expire or be closed in 60 days if the label's not removed.
Yeah.
Well, we do this manually right now. We've got the 30-day checks, and I think usually what happens is we say, can you try with Podman 4.x? And if they haven't responded with that in 30 days, when the stale check comes up, Dan usually closes it.
Yeah, basically, if you don't respond to, if someone asks you a question, you don't respond in 30 days, you're getting closed.
I think Ed can automate that, as opposed to you having to go in and...
That would be very nice in my life. Another thing that would be nice to automate would be, as Paul says, if you don't give us the Podman info output, have a robot come back to them and say, please give us the Podman info output. Yeah. Because otherwise we have no idea where they're coming from.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was thinking.
Well, here I am speaking like Ed's not present, simply because I haven't seen or heard him.
He's hiding.
He is in fact with us today.
I'm here. That kind of bot would disqualify pretty much every single issue that I file.
Yeah, we say if you're an owner, you're able to do it, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, as the author of the bot, you could maybe give yourself a workaround.
Mohan.
If I remember correctly, there is a template when you create an issue, right? Why don't you just add some notes in there as well? Like if it is against version 1, version 2, try version 4, something like that.
Well, it's already says like, have you tried with the latest version? They say yes, because latest version in their distribution in Ubuntu is 3.4. That's the latest version what they know. So it's like
basically something in the template.
People don't read it. Most people ignore it.
they don't read it. That's the point. Many don't fill out anything, which means they haven't read anything from there. So
okay.
And as Ed says, I'm guilty of that. Ed's guilty of that.
Or better yet, once the template comes up, they cut and paste it away and then put in the problem.
Yeah.
Which is fine for issues that Ed files, because everyone on the team knows that Ed tests main branch, everyone, he has a repute user that you can work with, that's fine. I can work with that. I don't need info. But from some random person, I don't know where they're coming from with what version or so on.
Yeah. Which OS, just knowing whether they're using run C or C run, whether or not the version is up to date, what version of builder they're using. I think if we come back with a robot saying, please enter Podman info, those of us that we know we're doing it, you can ignore it. It's just because that's basically what we're going to come in and say to them anyway. So at least eliminate the humans having to go in and say, please enter Podman info. If they don't.
Well, if we have a bot who says that, then we can have the bot close it after 30 days if there isn't an info.
Yeah.
Only thing is, we'd have to be vigilant for issues that come in with remote, because a lot of the remote issues come in and they say, well, I can't get info because Podman remote isn't working because SSH issues or whatever. That's not uncommon, I would say. So,
but does
Podman
work for those? Does Podman? I guess you could say Podman version then, right? So Podman info can blow up, but Podman version.
Version also blows up sometimes.
Version blows up as well, yeah.
We have very big issues if we can't talk to the server. That's something we need to work on.
Well, -- version works.
Yeah, that works. I mean, of course, if you start to automate, well, you will always find, where you have wrong stuff, where the automation failed and didn't catch something which it shouldn't, or like that will happen either way. It's, if we see that, we can fix the automation if we see something like that happen.
Users can always reopen anyways. So
no, they can't unless they use the, I believe, like /reopen or something, the command for the bot, because GitHub doesn't let you reopen issues.
I wish we had,
if you're not maintainer.
Wish we had an AI system to understand if it's a discussion versus an issue. So I can't get my container to run on Podman. That's not an issue. That's a discussion.
Right. So that's also. And another thing which I think you can do with a bot, not close. What's the name? Disable the old issues, because we have people commenting on 1-year-old issues that pop up somewhere, and maybe someone reacts to it. Often not. Why? You ignore it. So if we just block people from commenting on, if the issue is closed for a month, like block people from adding comments to it.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea, because even I get wrapped up in answering those, and then you realize that the issue they're talking about probably really isn't the same issue that's
Yeah.
the
I mean,
3-year-olds. Yeah. Might be something new.
One.
If no one is going to read the templates, there are issue forms that we can create in GitHub issues. So if you can add like a version field and they select version blah blah, and we can have something saying like, okay, version 3, close the issue with some comment on it. You can actually add the fields.
So
If
these
that
are, these are required. I actually think Podman Desktop has some of that that you have to enter data.
So maybe we can add some fields like that and automate on that, or give some notification to the user.
Yeah, we do have templates. If you want to look at those, maybe we could also unify a little bit on the templates.
Yeah,
somehow.
might be something.
Mm.
But yeah, if you have to, you can't hit basically submit until you enter in at least version info and whether this is a bug, an issue, or something else. That might be helpful.
I just shared the link for the docs. Take a look. It's just an YAML file with things that you want.
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
If folks don't mind. And then
I was about to say I hear Moen volunteering to implement this, but
well, I
if you
kind
want
of
to do
look what the desktop folks do. And Mohan, you're welcome to do it as well.
Yeah.
I guess I don't have the permissions.
Okay, I know I do.
Yeah.
So,
But I'm happy to help Brent.
well, it can be done as a PR as well.
Okay.
Just gonna wrap this one up and open it up for any further comments, questions, issues that people want to talk about.
I want to eat lunch.
How about we talk about for the next release? Just give some heads up.
Sure, go ahead, Brent. Or did you want Matt to run with that?
I think it's appropriate that Matt does it.
Okay. Let's see. 4.3 is, I want to say, 3 to 4 weeks old at this point. We're planning a 4.3.1 at some point, probably early December. We want to do a general
4.3.2.
4.3.2. Yes, we did a 4.3.1 with a single bug fix for the desktop team, but we're going to be doing a bug week at some point in the imminent future where we just try and close issues. Once that's done, we will cut a 4.3.2, which hopefully has a bunch of bug fixes in it. Then I would expect a feature release of 4.4 at some point in late January, with release candidates probably starting early January.
Yeah. My only thing there is the Auto is probably going to want the performance improvements a little sooner than that, but we'll see.
We got some of them into 4.3. The remaining ones are the ones that are just too big to backport. So we'd have to talk about moving 4.4 up.
Yep. Podman.
Thanks. I was curious, the volume thing that that came up in 4.3.0, was that candidate for 4.3.2, do you think, or would that wait for 4.4?
Which volume thing?
Let's say which one.
Okay. Podman Kube Play as of 4.3.1 does not, if you have volumes that are associated with the Kubernetes YAML, Podman Kube Play down will tear them down, but the next subsequent Podman Kube Play will see that the volumes exist and fail to start because it sees the volumes as already existing.
That's a bug fix that should be in.
Okay.
Yeah, I concur.
Thank you.
If you want to be dead sure, we should find the PR and put a cherry pick on it. That way.
Martin, do you have a PR or a issue number or Bugzilla on that?
I can get it shortly. It's 16 something. Let me get the number for you.
Just put a note in there as requesting it be cherry picked.
Yeah, or
Okay.
just shoot it at me, Martin. I'll take care of it.
Yeah, I was going to ask too that you just drop it into the chat here. Put it into the notes.
Probably might be.
anything that was fixed in Podman is probably okay. Things that were fixed in storage, containers image, containers common, those become a lot more difficult. Or if they're a major feature, then they're not going to get in.
So the other bit to just looking forward, might be worth sort of saying that we mentioned performance is been a focus, so folks can look forward to better startup performance of Podman when running a container. There's going to be some new cool stuff with Podman Machine. The desktop obviously will continue to march. We've got some pretty cool networking stuff that's on the cusp of either beginning or finishing, primarily in NetArc, that bring us closer to the stack that we had before with CNI. What other, anyone else remember big things we're working on?
There's more Podman kube play fixes, so
Yep.
decent amount of those coming in.
Yep.
And Quadlet. Quadlet would be the big one.
Quadlet. Yep.
Because Quadlet hasn't been released yet, so that'd be a 4.4 thing. I don't believe it's.
The DNS option too is kind of a small to medium change that's coming in.
Pasta support from the new rootless network option.
Oh yeah, pasta.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah, we might need to start talking about that from a rel point of view if it becomes Paul and I have talked about making that default in Fedora 39, I guess. Probably too late to make it default in Fedora 38.
Great.
Anything else on that or other questions, topics? Otherwise, I'm going to wrap up and get us off to lunch/dinner. Right. Just a quick reminder then for our next meetings. Our next Cabal meeting is on Thursday, December 15th. We have no topics now. I'd love to get some more if you have some. And then our next community meeting is coming up in just a couple of weeks now. That'll be on Tuesday, December 6th. That'll be at 11 a.m. Eastern as well. And there we have a demo from Min.io coming in for that. And we're still looking for topics beyond that if people are interested in seeing things or want to demo things there. So one last open call for any topics, questions, comments.
I think we should get the demo of kube using Kubernetes locally and using Kubernetes inside of something like OpenShift. That demo would be kind of neat.
Do you know who would be running that or who you're volunteering for that?
I'm volunteering Yagal. He's on the. Let me get his last name because I'm probably butchering his first name right now.
If you could just drop me a line.
Yeah, I will.
An email. That'd be great. All right. Well, then, given that, Urvashi, could you kill the recording, please?